How do you suggest that we, with our couple, get on a in sync page after kids and feels like we are living in two worlds?
The big challenge for women is to sort of separate the dad who may or may not be doing well, and then the husband that you're like, oh my God, you're my favorite person. You're the person that I like to be intimate with. You need to spend time away from your kids. You need to make time to just be husband and wife. We all know, for anyone that has kids are magic. They make you a family, but they really disrupt the marital roles.
We can kind of fuel our own tanks. We're going to show up better in every relationship. Thank you for listening to Help Them Bloom. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us reach more parents like you. Every share, comment, and review really makes a difference. Thanks so much for being part of our community. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I have an exciting guest today. She's a repeat guest because there's so much demand for her and for all the topics that we cover. Let me introduce her. Her name is Dr. Lisa Paz. She holds a doctorate in clinical sexology and is a board-certified sex therapist and a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's also been in private practice for almost 20 years, is an adjunct faculty at University of Miami, and is a mom of 3 very handsome boys. She also has a really fun Instagram account where she posts so much good stuff around sex, around, just the Tip Tuesday is like my favorite. But, I love her puns. Welcome back, Lisa.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and we needed the video version because we've done the audio, but we needed your facial expressions for when
Oh man, I'm so excited. I love everything that we do together.
Yeah. So, we tend to talk about, because you are a sex therapist and a marriage and family therapist, we tend to talk about really things around those topics, lots of stuff that affects couple dynamics, sex after kids, helping raise our kids with healthy sexual development and educating them in this world, this really fast-paced moving world. Today specifically, let's kind of start on the couple. Let's talk about how kids get in the way of sex, which feels like, I don't even feel like we need to explain, but let's explain.
Well, yes, the obvious is that they get in the way of sex. I think the less obvious is we don't really think that it's going to be such a big hurdle. And so one of the most challenging things I think for couples is that they really underestimate what the recalibration period back to a good, healthy, fun sex life is after having kids. So sure, we all know kids don't help a sex life, but I think we really forget, or no one talks about the impact of having kids. Because, so, if you think about the trajectory of how a couple comes together, everyone gets their dating, it's so hot. Yes, everyone's super into it. And then they go forward and they mark their commitment either through marriage or just monogamy or non-monogamy if you're really that way. But everyone's high-fiving down the sex line. It's good, it's hot, it's yeah. Okay, and then they go to have sex, and assuming, right, that everything moves forward, you have babies, depending on how your pregnancy is, you're either very sexual or you're not, right? And so that in and of itself is a 9-10 month change up in what they were doing all leading up, right? And then postpartum, you can't have sex for minimum 6 weeks, and that's best case scenario, breastfeeding, hormones, none of that assists.
Yeah.
Plus you're tired. And so all of a sudden, if you really sort of map out the chronology of a couple and their intimacy after kids, it's almost 2 years before they find their way back to each other. We don't really think about it that way. And then by the time we're trying to be more sexual, we're it just doesn't feel the same, or I just don't feel as hot. Does that make sense?
100%. I remember going to the OB for a 6-week follow-up, secretly praying he was not going to give me the green light. Nope, you can't do it yet. So then that feels like this underlying pressure almost.
No doubt. No doubt. So if you think for just a second, if we take a side step and just talk about female sexuality for a second, and males are a different breed. And as you said, I have 3 sons. I've been with my husband 23 years. So yay, I love men, but they're different. They are a different species. Women, for sex, right? It's not just about do we feel a burning in our loin? When was the last time you felt a burning in your loins? ever. I mean,
I'm going to share something that my husband's not going to be happy about right
I
now.
can't wait. I'm so
I'm going to
excited.
share, just to really tie this together, what
Oh
you're
my God,
saying.
I'm like blushing.
We were watching the other day a show about the Holocaust.
Okay.
Very, very intense. Very, very good show. It's called
Okay.
We Were the Lucky Ones, if anyone wants to watch it. Very good show. And then I just kind of see him like trying to like getting up, like ignore. I was like, this can't be. Like I ignored all the signs. I'm like, this can't be. And then we like didn't talk about it. He didn't try more. Like I was like, this has to be like a misunderstanding. Like this has like the show is still on. And then the next day we talked. Like he was like, oh, so you were not really into it last night. I was like, you mean while I was watching a show about the Holocaust, like crying, like this? Okay, so just to drive home your point about men and women, because he's like, but you can just like shut that off. And I was like, no.
It's the best illustration of this point. That is the best and funniest. I will be retelling that story tonight at dinner, by the way. And that's exactly right. Men can sort of compartmentalize even watching the Holocaust show. No less a baby crying in the other room, right?
Yeah.
And so he's going to kill you for that story,
Yes,
by
he
the way.
is.
I need the epilogue. Women, it's a whole identity. We need to feel good in our bodies. We need to feel energized. We need to feel connected to our partner. We need to not feel tired. Want to know what you feel when you have kids postpartum and even just in the raising kids, right? You're not as comfortable in your body. You're not energized. Who is not tired? And you're a mom. So like my famous line to couples is always, if you're raising your kids well, you are a mom and dad much more than you are a husband and wife, right?
Especially the first few years.
Especially the first few years. But you want to know who has sex? The husband and wife, not the mom and dad. And so finding time to really like step into that identity for women is a really, really important feature. Less so for men, as evidenced by that anecdote. Men do not need to step in.
I want to take a quick break from this episode to share more about my services offered at Hatch and Bloom. Whether you're seeking personalized one-on-one guidance or insightful group learning, we have the right support for you. Our private sessions provide you with the tools and strategies needed to support your child's growth. So take the next step in nurturing your child's potential and book a session with me today. Please visit hatchandbloom.co, that's .co, or you can email me at evelyn@hatchandbloom.co. Now back to the episode. Okay, so stepping out of the parent role
is critical. It's critical.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Okay. So this
is like bedtime. You've just done all the things. There's like the house is a mess. Like, how do you?
It's such a good question. Sort of the magic question. By the way, I spend so much time explaining to men that no woman ever did like bedtime routine and like I love you, and we've talked about this, right? And like you put your kids to bed, you tuck them in, little angel, and then you like walk across the hall, right? And you're like, oh, now I want to bend over and get weird, right? Like said no woman ever. And yet this seems to be, or no one teaches us how to make the shift is really what it is. So what you're asking is, how do you do it? With a lot of intentionality. Listen, I am a big fan of scheduled intimacy. I get extraordinary amounts of pushback when I first say it, and people make faces and they're like, ugh, I can't. But here's my pitch, and just ride the wave with me for a second. If you think about, right, the two hottest places that people report or constructs, right, of sexual satisfaction, it is courtship sex and affairs. Those are the two places that people will say most often, like, oh, the sex is really, really good. And I will tell you unequivocally what those two things have in common is it is scheduled. We don't think about it that way. We think about it as, oh, I'm meeting my lover or I'm going on a date. But it's scheduled. You know what's going to happen.
What's happening.
You know. And so what do women do? Go for every woman listening. Think about when you were dating. What did you do? You got ready. You put music on. You danced around in the mirror. Your bra and panties matched. You were shaved. You had game on. You know what I mean? And you created momentum, not even with the other person, inside of yourself, long before you ever stepped into an interaction that was sexual, right? Like hours before.
It's like a state of mind you were in.
Yeah. Totally. And you're nurturing it and you're like in your zone. Then all of a sudden we get married, we live with someone, we have children, and we're like in pajamas, like making pasta and butter or whatever your kid eats, right? And like fighting through bedtime. You're not dancing around in cute lingerie. You're not thinking like, oh, I'm going to be so hot tonight. No, you're not. You're like, okay, let me just get them to sleep because I'm tired. And yet we're asking ourselves to then find the sexual identity within our head in an unrealistic way. The scheduling piece really allows you to carve out time to show up as you need to. Research also shows that spontaneous mutual desire is actually very hard to achieve in long-term cohabitating couples. So the idea that you both at exactly the same moment in time are like, oh yeah, I'm right there, is actually a really false model. So having sort of this idea of, we know that Friday Eve, it doesn't need to be Friday at 8:17, right? But Friday evening is our night. It makes everyone have to take care of their side of the street. Shave, clean up, whatever, get the kids to bed early. Don't eat a huge steak and giant pasta meal where you're like, I didn't feel no bloated, I'm full, and now I'm like tired. Right. I mean, you're setting up to lose. So it requires intentionality. Does that make sense?
It does. So then if you're still, here's my like follow up to that. It's like you schedule something and then you're still like so tired. You're just like push through, right? Like you just push through basically.
Yeah. And not push through like in a way that you're traumatized, but yeah.
No. I've heard this about other things. It's sort of like do the motion and the feelings will follow kind of thing.
No doubt. Well, and interestingly, Evelyn, you're so smart for sort of landing there. What research shows about female sexuality is most women, not some, most women actually enter sex from a state of neutrality. So, and whenever I say this, like women, the light bulb goes off. For most women, they're like, I could take it or leave it.
Right.
But they sort of push through. And then 2 to 5, 7 minutes into it, right? Once they've quieted their head, once they've relaxed, once they're like, all right, I'm committed, are like, oh, like this is, I don't know why I fight this. This is actually, I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah. It's like going to the gym. It's like getting dressed and getting there. That's what it is.
Totally. And so I think sometimes we think we're supposed to want it, back to like my burning from the loins comment, right? Like that we're feeling this like big heat. For most women, it's neutrality. I know this is important to my couple. I know that this is something that we need to be doing, that you do it from a more neutral space. And then once you're in it, then you have that subjective feeling of like, I like this. This is good. I will tell you what else women should be doing to help them. Do you know what I'm going to say?
Maybe. I know. I feel like I know your repertoire.
I feel like you know. You need to be self-pleasuring. Women need a self-pleasure practice. If you want to keep that neural network firing, it can't be exclusively on the relationship. It's too much pressure. So I like women at least once a week to self-pleasure. If they can't fully climax, no problem. But at least 2 to 5 minutes of intentional effort each week to activate those neural pathways of intimacy. Otherwise, what happens is the brain in the sexual space is dormant all week. And then it's time to be intimate with our spouse. And we're asking the brain to fire from cold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So self-pleasure, being intentional, and being realistic. Like, I really, really, really think it is important that we don't set up to have intimacy. Again, when you have 4 kids sleeping over and you just got back from a PTA meeting and you're exhausted and the house is dirty, like, you really have to sort of strategize so you know when you can be in your best headspace.
This is why like vacations with your couple or with your partner are so different, because you actually are removing yourself from that hat. Like it feels so, the second you walk into the airport, you're like, okay, I am just me. Like I'm not mom anymore.
That I hear all the time, like on vacation sex. I'm like, yes, because there's no like hamper in the corner that you're like, oh shit, I have to do laundry. There's no like reminder of, can the kids hear, right? Like you're free and clear.
Yeah. My husband has been like, when I'm like, okay, even a staycation, I just need to be like out of this house. And he's like, well, what if like, you know, everyone's just extra quiet? I'm like, it's not a vacation. Like you're still tied to everything. Your mental load is still very much present in your own home.
And visible, like really visible, like even just opening your eyes and like seeing a pile of laundry in the corner, right? That's not sexy. No. Men don't care. By the way, men don't care. They don't care if they're bloated. They don't care if there's laundry on the floor.
They don't care if the Holocaust show is in the background.
They don't care if the Holocaust show is on. I am waiting. I ask women, when are you most able to check into a sexual interaction? Here's what they'll say. I kid you not. When the dishes are clean, when the house is clean, when the kids are out. Like nothing to actually do with sex. Everything to do with headspace environment. When things are not stressful and my to-do list is low. And when I feel good in my body.
Yeah.
I have been talking to Bill for 20 years about sex. I am waiting. I'm waiting to hear the man that says, I'm like so bloated. I just, no BJ for me tonight. No existe. It does not exist. I'm waiting. No, no. So also listen, understanding that, I think it's important for those couples or for those women listening that are in a heterosexual couple, educate your partner. A lot of times what happens with women is they will start eliminating affection during the course of the week for fear that it will be read as a green light. So I'll hear a lot of women be like, I would love to get in bed and like make out with my husband for 30 seconds. But if I do that, forget it. He's going to see it as a green light.
Right.
Or I would love to walk by my husband while we're making dinner in the kitchen and like rub on him or give him a wink. But if I do that, he's then going to think it's game on tonight. And I actually don't want it to be game on. I would just like to create a little spark. So I always say, like, we got to educate our partners and let them know, like, and this is where scheduling comes in. We have our anchored night, but I want to relate to you all week in this way.
So with scheduling, do you recommend, I think you've said this before, to not go outside of it?
What I really ask couples to do is to stay pretty loyal. It needs to almost be an implicit social contract, because what really the scheduling allows is everyone to ease into being flirtatious and create momentum throughout the course of the week. And if all of a sudden one of you makes a grab for more, and really it's if the guy makes a grab for more, right? Then now you've sort of said, nope, this is a fake. It's like covering your eyes in a movie where you're like, I'm not watching, right? But you are. So it's sort of that. But what I found a lot of men report is, listen, men like frequency. And the most common, what research shows is the most common male complaint is frequency. But anecdotally, what I hear from most men is, yes, they would love more frequency, but they would also just like to feel like they're not the only one managing the sexual energy in the relationship. And what a lot of the males don't realize is, create a little space. She can come to you and be flirtatious and be affectionate. Just don't see it as a total grab for sex, right? Like, receive it and keep it moving.
It's also like a buildup that you're creating.
Totally. Which, by the way, if we go back to dating sex, right? Like, you text during the week, or you talk, or you're excited to see this person.
Yeah.
That's right. And back to also those neural networks. We're firing those neural networks all week long, such that when it comes time to be more sexual, your brain and your body are like, all right, I've been firing this all week.
That makes so much sense. You know, and then there's this like huge emotional component for women that we know. How do you suggest that we, with our couple, like we kind of get on a in sync page after kids? Like, that feels really hard because it often feels like we are living in two worlds completely. And we're just on separate pages when it comes to that. Like, even just the mental load is so different.
Oh, I know. Yes. By the way, and within that, there's a lot of resentment, right? Like, if we start to see our spouse as another child or not pulling equitable weight, or that's also not hot, right?
I know. And things get mixed. This is what it is, because the roles get kind of like enmeshed, right? So it's like the dad is not pulling his weight. How do I go back to like loving my husband in this moment? Like, it's all together.
That's the perfect distinction. And that's the big challenge for women, is to sort of separate the dad who may or may not be doing it well, right? And then the husband that you're like, oh my God, you're my person. You're my favorite person. You're the person that I like to be intimate with. And so, listen, what I'm about to say sounds so like eye-rollingly cliche that it annoys me. I'm even going to say it, but it's the truth, which is, you need to spend time away from your kids. You need to make time to just be husband and wife, because otherwise you are wearing the wrong hat. The mom and dad role is amazing. It's magic.
Yeah.
Listen, we all know, for anyone that has kids are magic.
Yeah.
They make you a family, but they really disrupt the marital roles. They really decline the satisfaction in the In fact, research shows that couples year one postpartum report the lowest satisfaction in the marriage. And there's a lot of guilt attached to this, because look, babies are like joyful and, oh, you're pregnant, congratulations, you had a baby, congratulations. Right. There's so much like implicit messaging that it's so happy. And it's
like toxic positivity. That's really what it is.
Yes, totally. And it is so happy. Listen, yes, it's amazing. But it also brings with it high stress, low sexy, and a real interruption in the marriage that we don't think about, because we're like, oh, we just became like mom and dad. It's magic, but it's family. And by the way, you don't fuck your family members, right? Like, and that's the other problem, is that children make you guys a family. And that's beautiful, but it blurs the role of your sex partner because all of a sudden they're not just your sex partner, they're your family member, right? Now we're like family.
Like that clicks so, like the way you just phrased that makes so much sense. It really is a lot of pressure to be like switching this in your head so much, you know?
It is.
And I know some partners, and like especially in the beginning, have a hard time. Let's say you're postpartum and early, have a hard time because they start to feel a little neglected sometimes. And then it's like also for it's so much pressure because you're always taking care of somebody. It's like you're either taking care of your baby and when you're neglecting your partner, or you're taking care of your partner, you're neglecting your baby. And it just feels like this feeling of nothing's enough for everybody.
And you're how many women have you heard be like, I'm overtouched?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be touched again.
Yeah. I mean, you're breastfeeding and then you don't want anyone else on your boobs. And like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. That's right. And so listen, again, more cliche, but cliches exist for a reason. Self-care is critical for women. Like making time for yourself to exercise, to get the massage, to get the pedicure, to hang out with your girlfriends, to whatever you do for self-care. But those are the things that help you not be consumed entirely by the mom role, which is, I can't underscore enough, not the role that you have sex in.
Yeah.
The mom is not who has sex. So if you are only ever in your mom role, and then you're sitting there like, I wonder why it's so hard for me. It's because sex is a headspace. It is a room you step into in your head to
and
activate.
I don't even think only for sex, but even just emotional intimacy. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, you know, if we can kind of fuel our own tanks with like whatever it is we need to feel good, we're going to show up better in every relationship. Like that's
entirely.
100%. Yeah.
Entirely. And the emotional connection to your partner too. Like I always tell men, foreplay starts when you help make the lunch, right?
Yeah.
Or like when you take the garbage out, or when you anticipate, right? Like anticipate the need of your partner. And it's interesting because, again, and no knock on males because I love them all, but it just is such not the way their brain works, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't need you to anticipate that they need clean socks in order to get an erection and want to be with you, right? Like that doesn't make them feel close. But if a male is able to anticipate your need, right? And was like, oh, I threw a load of laundry in, or I know that you have a big day. I ordered in dinner for us, so you don't have to worry about it, right? Like that little bit of taking off the load actually clears up space for intimacy.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to think about because it doesn't feel linear. It's not a particularly sexy activity, and yet it creates a little space for sexuality.
Yeah. It's like acts of service become like your love language when you become a parent. That's really what I feel like, right?
Totally.
Taking a load off. Yeah. So that's also part of educating your partner because they don't work that way. Like they don't. I brought this up with you last time we spoke, but I love to bring it up. It really, like my favorite scene of a couple ever in a movie is the breakup when, is it the breakup? Yeah, I think when Vince Vaughn is washing the dishes and she's so upset because he doesn't want to initiate to wash. He doesn't want to wash the dishes. And he's like, who the fuck wants to wash the dishes? But it's just this idea that we create sometimes where I think like we think they can mind read or that they work in the same way or that they should feel, they should know better. And that's destructive.
It's destructive and it sets up for it's ineffective, right? And so what should that look like, right? Like for everyone listening, what should that actually look like? That should look like, oh my God, I listened to this amazing podcast and you want to know what they were talking about is that we need to be better communicators about how we each show up intimately. I will tell you, and not that I want to make sex transactional and manipulative and contrived and blah, 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 but you would be surprised how helpful men become when they make the connection, right?
That is their reward.
Correct. Or that it frees up space, that it genuinely frees up space. So what it should look like is I don't necessarily say it enough to you, babe, but our intimacy is important to me too. What I realized is for me, it means that we're sort of firing on the same page all week. For me, it means that you're helping me take some stuff off my plate so that when it comes time for us to be intimate on the weekend or when we're not so tired or when we're both on page, right? Like I don't have a million things running in my head. I know that sounds crazy to you, but I just want you to know that's how I work. And I still find you sexy and I still want you. And I don't say it enough or show it enough because sometimes and here's just the honesty. Sometimes I feel like if I come and hug you or if I rub my boobs on you or if I kiss you with a tongue, just because that you're going to read that as a green light for more. And I don't necessarily want to do more, but I still want you to know I'm into you, right? So sometimes we just need to overstate the obvious and almost teach them. And I don't mean it in like a pedantic teach them way.
Yeah.
I mean, like really re-educate them on how you're operating now at this stage of life. And by the way, this gets re-inventoried over and over, right? So like when you have little kids, it's once they go to bed, right? Like, okay, bedtime. I now have teenagers. So now, right, there's a different obstacle because they stay up later than us. So now it's not even like, okay, bedtime, how, you know, bedtime
you don't get
routine.
To clock out. Like it's
now
different.
we're like, well, what do we, like, we got to wait till they're out of the house because really, I mean, they're up till the middle of the night. Anyway, so my point in this is that at every stage, this needs to be re-inventoried. Start the conversation now. Otherwise, what happens is the conversation gets had when it breaks. And then it's a shit
and there's like resentment. There's like a lot of resentment.
Yes. Frame it up and like, this is important to me. Maybe I don't show it enough. Like, I want you to know it doesn't mean I want it necessarily more, but I want to make it a priority.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Almost like any kind of checkup you're going to have. This is part of it, right?
Period.
What do you okay, so can we talk about date nights for a minute?
Yes.
What is your opinion on, because especially when you have little kids, I feel like they take up a lot of the content of what you bring into date night. What do you kind of recommend to your couples around that? Because I've heard things. So I've heard like really try to not talk about the kids during date night. I don't know if that matters. I don't know if it doesn't. Like, what do you think?
Listen, I think it depends on the couple, right? And so if that's one of the ways you guys feel really connected.
Yeah. Like if you're laughing about something cute.
Correct. And it makes you feel connected. But I do think that there needs to be, and this is back to like, if you're talking about the kids to punctuate sweet stories, but then it moves to you guys, right? Then it's functional. If the only way you guys know how to relate to each other is through being family members, remember, when you're talking about the kids, you're family. You're the mom and the dad talking about your babies, this family you created. That's not your sexual identity. So if it's a lead in to get you guys to relate, but what you should be thinking about on date night is, how do I show up as a woman, not as the mom? That looks different for different people. Does that mean you guys have read the same article? Does that mean you guys are going to talk about a new vacation? Does that mean you talk about a project you want to do in the house? You know, but you want to go ahead. What are you thinking as I say that?
No. I totally see that. And I also feel like that also helps you stay proactive or really prevent what can happen after so many years where you just like don't even know each other as a couple. Like you just are parents forever and ever and ever. And then these kids leave the house and you're like, who are we together? Like it kind of preserves that.
Totally. And you're hitting not only how infidelity happens, but how that empty nest syndrome happens, right? Where the only sort of, or the bulk of content that existed was the family content. And as the family content diminishes, you're like, we actually don't have content to relate to each other on. We stop growing together as a husband and wife.
Yeah. So it's not just sex. It's really just even as your couple dynamic, period.
Correct. I also like to encourage couples to find out, like, what is your thing? What do you guys do? Right. Like, so like we're big travelers and like we plan vacations very well together. That's one of our things. Like some couples cook together. Some couples are like bikers or marathoners or they art collectors, like whatever it is. But find your thing so that you guys have an identity that is separate from your children and lean into that a little bit. Again, it doesn't need to take up hours and hours, but on a date night, remember, like, almost visualize we are just a man and a woman also, you know? It's really breaking that family role.
That makes so much sense. Speaking of family and kids, we're going to segue. I want to segue a minute into... Okay, let's go back to the parents. We're parents now. We're not
right. We're done. We left marriage.
We left. This is who we are.
That's it.
99% of the time. Okay, we're parents and we are raising kids. And actually, I'm kind of starting to experience this myself with my 9-year-old being very curious about sexual development. She knows like the reproduction. She doesn't yet understand. We haven't gotten to like what sex really is, or like I kind of gauged the other day where I was trying to be like, I'm very open with her, so I was trying to be like, what do you guys like talk about, like you and your friends, or like what do you know about like puberty, or what do you know, because she and I have had these conversations and she's like, or where do babies come from? I don't remember what we said, and she was like, well, it's from the, that thing that like swims like a fish. I'm like, the sperm? She's like, yeah, the sperm and the egg and like the fastest one. And like, she did the whole thing. And I was like, okay. And I was gauging if we needed to go to the next step yet. So I was like, okay, well, where does the sperm like come from? Like, where does it live? And she looks at me and she's like, how should I know? And
You're like, touche, you shouldn't. That's right.
No.
That's perfect.
She didn't ask me anything else. She literally just moved on. So I moved on. But I know that this is coming. This is coming soon because there's the friends now gather and talk. But there's a lot of misinformation, right? So she came to lunch the other day. We were in a restaurant for lunch and she just shouted out, "What, 69?" And it's like, okay. I was like, "What do you know about 69?" And she's like, "That I heard that's how babies are made." And I was like, okay. So that is a to be continued conversation we were holding. But again, like, how do we do this? And I know that we're going to have a whole workshop on this.
I know,
so
I'm so excited.
What do you want to say about talking to our kids about sex?
This
because as you know, this was not something I was talked about.
No, the van. For those that don't know, Evelyn got picked up in a van and got taught the birds and the bees. It's my favorite Evelyn story of all time. The Holocaust story now is coming in a close second. I'm collecting Evelyn stories. This is one of my most favorite topics. I think it's probably the thing I'm most passionate about talking about because it's underspoken about in the ways that make our healthy children. So we're raising kids now in an information age. Most of us got some talk if we were raised by cool, open parents, maybe more talk, but the information access was much different than it is today. And so one of the things that we really need to start doing early is laying the foundation about how to have conversations, not just about sex in the way we think about sex, right? And the adult projection of it, which feels very inappropriate to talk to kids about. But it starts, as you had said, it starts with anatomy very early on and creating a neutrality around body and body function. And then it is a series of layering on discussions at every point in a child's development. And by the way, as everyone listening to, children develop at different paces. So you can have a very precocious, mature 9-year-old, or you can have a very babyish 9-year-old if there's older siblings in the house. So anyway.
Right.
But one of the big pieces here is that, the whole the talk, that is old, right? That is no longer the model. The model is not one weird talk that you cringe through when you're a pubescent child and just dying at the dinner table.
Just take me anywhere else.
Right, exactly. No, the idea is that this is a conversation to be had through raising your children. And my favorite way to talk about it with parents is it is a bunch of sound bites, right? That you deliver throughout the course of their childhood such that it doesn't ever become this awkward, weird thing, but it's just one other thing that you are teaching them. We're teaching them so many things: how to be kind, how to be polite, how to be smart, how to be conscientious, how to be sexually comfortable, conscientious, responsible humans is just one of the many things
I love
that we need to teach our kids, right? And so gaining the tools and practicing how to do that. I mean, part of what we're going to be talking about in our workshop. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And for the next generations, hopefully it won't be as awkward. But for us, because we were never really kind of talked to in that way, it does feel, there's very taboo. It feels very taboo.
It feels very taboo. It feels very much, one of the things I hear most from parents is I don't want to give permission, right? This fear that information equals permission. And also, they don't want to say more than what they think that their child
put
might
ideas
know.
In their head.
Right. And so I think your example of sort of well, what do you think? Is really one of the best ways to do it. And the thing is, if you successfully establish yourself as the information source, that in and of itself is enough because they'll start coming 100%. To you.
So that's what I'm seeing, right? So that's why she's coming and asking me these things. I have visceral reaction to thinking about asking my parents that ever in my life. I could never even just bring up the words of questions I had in my head. So the fact that I see that she can be where's that tampon go? Because she'll see these things, right?
Yep.
Or can I see the blood? Or she's very curious.
Yes.
But it's we've got there. We've got that communication bridge open and she knows that she can cross it at any time. And then I do my periodic check-ins with her too. She's still babyish compared to other people, but you always have to gauge because she's surrounded by other people.
Every parent's not my child. And I have parent lock and I have this and that.
They're
exposed. I mean, I don't know. You and I have talked about this. I remember we would look up a bad word in the dictionary, right? That was, it is just different now. And so I always tell parents, if you want to be the one that is monitoring the information, you better establish yourself as the front line of the information because they're going to get it. They are going to get it. So yes, I think the idea is very early to start with neutrality, anatomy, And then it is a series of layering as we go. And layering
it's earlier than people think. So what age would you say?
I like to, I'm going to say 3, 4, start using anatomically correct terms. You can still use the pet names, the cookie and the pee-pee and all the little names that we use. That's okay. But by 4, your children should know also the anatomically correct names. Early on too, by 3, 4, certainly by 5, a lot of the discussion should be around safe touch. And so part of our other responsibility and what research shows for any parent that is uncomfortable with these conversations, here is always my if you're uncomfortable, this will break your discomfort. Research shows that children that have language and more open awareness and knowledge are less likely to be molested.
Yes.
And so if that's not an incentive to start talking to your children, I don't know what is. So by 3, 4, 5, we also want to be talking about private parts versus public parts and about safe touch and about consent. Who can touch you, who can't, who can touch you where, what it means to say no if you don't want to be touched. So that's sort of that first round of discussion. And again, some of this is punctuated by exposure. Did they walk in and see you guys doing something? Do you have older siblings in the house? Do they have cousins that are older? So you also have to have your baseline and then gauge accordingly because life.
Yeah.
Because life,
Yeah. And you using just you talk about this before, but using the organic kind of entry points, if you're watching a movie together and something is there and you just want to kind of explain or be what do you know about that? What do you think about that? Or whatever it is, right?
That's the best way.
Yeah, it is.
What that does is it doesn't make it weird.
Normalizes it.
You're not hey, so I remember my mother went like this. Hey, do you have any question? And I was well, even if I did, I'm not going to ask them now, right? So yes, and by the way, I also encourage women to say things if it's true, I mean, not if it's not, right? Oh, I have cramps, I have my period. To whether you have sons or daughters, right? Oh, my boobs are sore, my back hurts, my breath. Because that also then tees up for them to either be whatever, they don't care because kids are a little narcissistic, may or may not care that you have a headache because your progesterone levels are shifting, right? Or for them to be why, right? And you then to just be able to be oh, because when you get your period, this happens. Yeah. And what does that do? And we don't realize it, but again, I want everyone to see have layers get formed. It then provides a conversation, not necessarily in that moment, but to talk about what a period signifies, what it means to ovulate, right? So it's a series of layering on.
Right. We had our first period. Oh my gosh. And now I'm remembering 2 period conversations. One was in a restaurant. Everything's happening in restaurants for me.
Listen.
One was I went to the bathroom and I think I got my period. She was with me. And so she was there for the whole thing. And I was I'll explain it now. We got to go back up. And then I started to, not the whole thing, but I started to explain. And then we were at her dentist's office, and there was a whole basket of tampons and pads. And she's what are these for? And then I was well, remember we were talking about what happened in the other bathroom, or in this bathroom, and in the waiting room of the dentist. That is what we talked about. And every time, and let's say I do have my period and I'm not feeling so well, and I tell her I have low energy because of this. Every time we kind of just add more to it. And it's not just this one big scary thing. The movie that was amazing for her and me for this was Dear God, It's Me, Margaret.
By Judy. I remember the book when I was growing up, the Judy
She read the book. So I had her read the book, and then I promised her we could watch the movie as a reward. And I was so emotional in it. I'm oh my God, I'm remembering all this. We could tie it together there, all of it,
Totally.
But it's what you're saying. It's bits and pieces and bits and pieces. And it makes it not so scary for them either.
Or for you.
For you.
Right? Because then you don't have to sit down and have this whole, it's by the way, and I'm going to say this and I know we're wrapping up, but I invite everybody who's listening who has sons to not hear this conversation as just for if you have daughters. You know how many grown men that I work with that don't know that the period and the pee hole are different, that the urethra and the vaginal canal are 2 different. We can talk to boys about this too. In fact, we should, right? Because it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's private, just like going to the bathroom is private or passing gas is private, right? Yeah. We can make the distinction that it's a private thing, but it's not shameful and it's not exclusive to women in terms of being aware.
Yeah.
You can understand body process.
100%.
And you can be sensitive.
When we were doing IVF, this was with both my ex-husband and my current husband. They were so confused about what was put where. where the baby grew. Like nothing. Like I was just in shock of just
Right.
how little awareness. But this is the culture of men, I feel like, and how they're raised. So what you're saying is so important. And I know your boys are so informed.
They're so informed. They're so informed. I mean, mine are really informed. Oh, listen, you got to walk the walk. But again, I could talk about this for hours. I love this, but so I'll say this and then I know we'll go. But if I really am getting everyone to think about this in terms of layers, right? If we can talk and teach boys and girls about anatomy, I just want everyone to see how the thread comes together, right? Early on, and things like period and things like understanding the different holes in a woman's genitals. You want to know what that leads to down the line? It leads to a healthy sexuality because they will understand that the clitoris is different than the vagina. Then it lays on down the line, right? Not for your 5-year-old, but down the line for your teenage child to understand how they work sexually, so that you don't have a daughter who at 40 is still unaware of how to climax because she doesn't realize that the clitoris is the primary sex organ for a woman, or because she doesn't even know where to locate it, or because you have a 40-year-old man that's like, why doesn't my wife want internet, right? Because it's like, because they don't know anatomy. And so it lays a foundation that we keep adding to as we go. Anyway.
Okay, we have so much more that we're going to say
I'm so excited
in our upcoming workshop. If you're a parent and you want guidance on raising healthy children all around sexual development and everything we're talking about today, like we'll give you more information about that. But Lisa, I could talk to you forever and ever, but we have to cut it. We have to cut it.
I know.
Thank you so much. Like, this is gold. Everything you give us is gold.
Thank you for having me. I love you. I love being here. I always feel like it's such a privilege to talk to you, and then also just to have these conversations.
Yes.
At large, you know, what a gift. What a gift.
I just want to PS something here. Lisa has these workshops already online.
So I have downloadable courses for women, right? How to manage and develop your own sexuality. And then there's also downloadable courses for how to talk to your kids. So there's one for raising your kids ages 2 to 11. And then I have a new one for tweens and teens.
Ooh,
it's great. It's great. It's great. That really just starts getting you thinking about how to do this. And it gives you the tools and it breaks down the information so that it doesn't feel so scary. And you can watch it and you can watch it again and again and just sort of start practicing what is appropriate information, what you should be hitting, and then how to go about doing it. So I invite everyone to go check them out. They're on my website.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Help Them Bloom. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us reach more parents like you. Every share, comment, and review really makes a difference. Thanks so much for being part of our community.